This means it's not canon though, which is because it's the same universe.
What?
Yeah.
What canon are we lining up with?
But like Disney's just relinquishing the reins and saying
They better. Maybe they're learning. Look, you
can't do it in canon.
Wait, is he saying that that's a bad thing? He said the planet isn't canon, but we don't know what the planet is. Does he mean canon to Star Wars, or does he mean planet or canon to like the corner of the galaxy where KOTOR takes place? Because that's only like half a dozen planets at most between both games, I think. It's a very rough half dozen, but
or so. Yeah. Okay. So plenty of time
3,900
to work with, but enough that there's still a Starforge created ship on a planet.
This means it's not canon though, which is because it's the same universe.
I assume he's talking about the cold-looking planet where we see the Starforge ship crashed. Most of KOTOR isn't canon. Well, okay, good to know. But also that kind of adds to the question of, he says this means, wait, get the exact
created ship on a planet.
This means it's not canon though, which is because it's the same universe.
This means it's not canon though because it's the same universe. Okay, so he's saying because KOTOR wasn't canon, and this is the KOTOR universe, it's also not canon. I don't know why he's saying that like it's a problem, unless it's like Star Wars lore politics that I'm missing context for. Ricotta Prime, right?
Yeah.
What canon are we lining up with?
But like Disney's just relinquishing the reins and saying
they better. Maybe they're learning. Look, you
can't do it in canon. It cannot. As soon as you open a lightsaber and put a crystal in there and not bleed it and shit, you're already in trouble. Like you cooked your canon.
True.
Bro.
True.
How are we not mentioning the fact there's no Ebon Hawk? Because it's not a direct sequel. It's a spiritual successor. But maybe you'll be able to upgrade your ship.
And I will say, I think that was a good move on their part. Because I think as much as they might have gotten a whole lot of excitement out of KOTOR fans for seeing the Ebon Hawk, it would have completely overrode all of the "it's not a sequel" messaging that they could have said that till they were blue in the face. And if the Ebon Hawk was in the teaser trailer, it wouldn't have actually like sunk in for anybody, I don't think. Wouldn't get hung up on canon too much. New stuff under Disney does reference the old lore a lot. Star Wars fans get hung up a bit on too much. Honestly, there's so much Star Wars media out there that, as far as I'm concerned, like, when I, like, because sometimes I ask, like, is this canon or is that canon? Or, like, I think I mentioned, before I remembered that Revan is canonically male, I said something about, when the Exile was talking to Karth in KOTOR 2, I think I said something along the lines of, wait a second, was a romance with Karth actually canon? Because even though I definitely failed the romance in KOTOR 1, the way that Karth was talking made it really easy to believe that maybe there was meant to be an implied romance if, like, you didn't romance somebody else or something. So when I say canon, I'm thinking canon in the context of the specific storylines, because I don't have a lot of the other like media spheres that all fall under the gigantic Star Wars umbrella. So like intellectually I know that a lot of those probably contradict each other or whatever, but for me I'm only talking about it in the context of the story I'm looking at. Right. I have no idea. I assume that when they're talking about like Star Wars canon as a whole, they mean stuff that is like intended by George Lucas or lines up with like specifically what's in the movies. And I'm like, on the one hand, because I'm weirdly OCD about things being like accurate, I understand that to some extent. But to another extent, there are so many other individual spheres of Star Wars stories under that umbrella now that the other part of my brain goes, what the fuck does it even matter? Like, even if you could decide on one definition of canon, who the fuck cares now? Because it's not like you've got two. Let me put it this way. I could see if there was like a spin-off Star Wars story that directly contradicted huge, significant parts of the original lore. Like, Jedi, only a specific, like, you know, niche of, like, specialization of Jedi actually wield lightsabers, and everyone else actually just has fancy blasters. Like, and that was what they said, this is how it is in our version of the Star Wars universe. Okay, then I can see arguing canon if it's, like, two directly competing, like, major, I'm going to say IPs because I want to cover, like, stories and games and movies and TV shows and whatever. Two major, like, story IPs that both fall in the Star Wars galaxy. That I could see. But at this point, there are so many different ones. Like, mini book trilogies and game series and other game series and movies and TV shows, and so many of them are created by so many different people that at this point, it's not like, it's more like it just kind of muddied the exact facts of, like, certain storylines maybe in some places, but it doesn't contradict, like, it's not a competitor, if that makes sense. And if it's not directly competing with the things that made Star Wars, then who the fuck cares whether it's, like, whatever you decide to count as canon? And also, who gets to decide? I mean, I guess George Lucas would, but... Let me get to chat here now that I finished my big old spiel there. Parts of KOTOR canon, there's canon Revan and Malachor. Maybe Rakata Prime and Starforge, and everything else isn't canon yet. That's the other thing, is that depending on who gets to say when it's canon, like, even if it's not now, how many people have to love it before it starts being... It's sort of like a... Sorry if this analogy doesn't make sense to everybody. It's the best one I've got at the moment. It's kind of like a house rule in D&D. 5th edition D&D, there were a lot of like, gameplay tweaks and rule tweaks that a lot of new players, like myself at the time, didn't realize were not part of the original rules because they were so widespread accepted as house rules that they almost weren't considered house rules anymore. It was almost like, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but encumbrance. So D&D rules has a whole section, and I'm talking like the 2014 5th edition now. There's, I guess, like a whole section that describes how much your character can carry, and that's how much you can have in your inventory, and every item that you can have in your inventory has a weight that's supposed to add up. And yet, it's like almost universally accepted that nobody gives a shit about encumbrance. So it's weirder to find a DM who actually enforces the encumbrance rules than it is to find a DM who house rules it and says nobody gives a shit. Does that make sense? Now that's kind of a bad example because they probably still have encumbrance in the 2024 edition, but like some of the like, I actually just had an example of this come up in my D&D game last week, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was specifically, but it was one of those where it was super commonly like house ruled to be arguably better, more convenient in the original 5th edition, that when they released the like 5.5 edition in 2024, They just made it part of the game. They said, okay, well, everybody is making this a house rule anyway. We'll just put it in the rules, and we'll just make it that way, since everybody's using it that way anyway. And, you know, that was an improvement. So now that I've gone on that massive tangent, it is tying back, I swear. How many people does it take to be passionate about a specific story or the events surrounding a specific set of characters in the Star Wars galaxy before the judges of all things canon decide to just adopt it as canon now because everybody loves it? You know? I don't know if how that's adding how I don't know if that is how adding canon works, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's part of it. Star Wars is just wouldn't surprise you if the remake makes it all canon. Star Wars is just a giant miss. I mean, to be looked at through a blurry telescope. That makes sense. To context here, a lot of fans use the phrase canon to reference Disney's new continuity starting in 2015. Okay. Normal usage is just discussing whether one story happened to relative to the next. For example, KOTOR 1 is canon to KOTOR 2. Right. Which is kind of more how I use it. It's like obviously it can be assumed that the prequel trilogy of movies is canon to Fallen Order. For reasons which I discovered last week. You know, at the very least, that much can be figured out, that kind of thing. Honestly, it doesn't matter as much as fans make it seem, especially as I get older. I care about things being canon as that increases chances that Disney uses it. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. If Revan and KOTOR are canon, we might get more games or shows, movies, anything really. Yeah, that's a very good point. Which is also interesting because I like that kind of positions the whole question of what counts as canon as being less of a point of civil war among Star Wars fans and more of a tool to use to get more cool stories, to wring more cool stories out of Disney. It's like, no, we love this. We love this. Make it canon and give us more.